Hey everybody, nice to meet you, Claude and Kara. Thanks for having this put together, Scott. It's just been incredible. So I'm a big believer in what a good friend of mine started preaching years ago that he wishes he would have preached years earlier, and that is that without his employees, he'd have no business. And he delivers keynotes based on that all the time. And long story short, he went through a very life-changing family emergency where his teenage son committed suicide, and it caused a huge challenge in his world. It rocked his world as a CEO with 30 employees on staff, and he literally was out of the picture for 2 years, getting his head right. And over those 2 years, his employees stepped up without even being asked, and they showed him that his business would actually not only survive, but it thrived while he was going through that. And that story simply just resonates well with me, but it certainly is something I suspect you guys can appreciate, because that shows leadership skills that he probably never, he says he didn't even realize he had over the years prior. So I don't have as much of a story or as much of a question as I just wanted to share that with everybody. And I would love to get your opinion on something like that, because I just think that is a true mark of leadership. He had his best years ever as an entrepreneur, as a business, and he wasn't even around.
Yeah, and I'm sure there was a ton of work prior to that in actually making people feel like they were owners and that they wanted to actually step up and help them. I think being a leader is also somewhere along the way. I feel like there's previous leaders that I've heard talk about, like you might not be liked, and that's okay. And I don't think that works today. I think you actually, in order to lead, you do need to be liked, right? And I think that's a really it. And I bet he even prior to this terrible tragedy, I mean, I think that is a very, very important piece of it as well, that the people will ultimately step up if they feel like they want to support you.
I agree completely. And I think one of the marks of a real leader is, are you removing fear from the system? I mean, first of all, you're not causing fear, but are you able to remove fear from the system? Because no one operates well in fear in politics and all that gunk that comes with it. So one of the things that we say a lot to our senior leaders is, if you, for whatever reason, couldn't come back to work for 3 months, whatever happened, do you have a strong enough bench? Do you have the right people in place? And not the right people that can just make the money. And that's not what I'm talking about. I go, always go back to the honey empire, and optimism is such an incredible, powerful force. And there is such a thing as learned optimism, and optimism by osmosis. And are you a leader? And do you have leaders that can do that? That can really carry forward, your values, your mission. And I don't mean the things that are written on the wall. I mean who you are, who you really stand for when you get up and address in all hands. Or to Kara's point, one-on-ones. I mean, we're such a high-touch culture. Without our one-on-ones, we might as well shut our doors and become one of those other great agencies that are out there, but they're not like us. So, it comes back to people over everything, and being really,
it always does,
authentic about it.
I was interviewing. I have a podcast called The Kara Goldin Show, and the episode hasn't come out yet, but I was interviewing a guy named David Novak. If you guys know who David is, he was the former chairman of Yum Brands, and he's retired now. Super good guy, and he won tons of awards for being this incredible leader at Yum, which is KFC and some of the other retailers, or fast food restaurants that are out there. Anyway, it was really interesting in the conversation, which it should be out in a couple of weeks. You guys have to listen to this interview. But he talked about praise and how what he realized was that he didn't do until later on in his career was actually take the time to praise people. And and just by, he had these awards for, and when I was interviewing him, I asked him, so like, okay, praise, like, then there's all these complications, because then if you praise one guy, and then do you have to praise the guy that's in the same group? And it was interesting, what he said was that he had originally gone and interviewed this gentleman at this factory, and who worked for him, and he had some of the highest output, and all of his team, really liked him a lot. And he was giving him an award, and the guy started crying, and he said, "Don't cry. Like, we're just giving you an award because, you've got great numbers, you've saved the company money, you've done great," and said all of these things. And he said, "I've worked here for 24 years and no one has ever praised me." And he said at that point, he thought, how awful, like, to live in a world where every single day you show up and yet you're not actually being praised. And he said it was a miracle that this guy continued doing what he was doing every day. So he decided to actually start praising his employees. And it wasn't like 4 times a year or once a year. He would just do it randomly. And he would give people awards when he saw something that was outstanding. And he said that that the output was just amazing. And then his managers started having their own awards as well. And anyway, it was a